Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So we have 11 days to go before Election Day. People are already voting in many states. I encourage people to get out and vote if they haven't already. Take people with you. This thing is far from over, even though a lot of the data we have looks good for Donald Trump, and it couldn't really come at a better time, and we're seeing Democrats panic. We're seeing Democrats in total and complete disarray, and another thing that's kind of backing up the trajectory of the race is the national polling. Now, keep in mind, this day in history, if you look at 2020, Joe Biden led by 8 percentage points. Hillary Clinton in 2016 led by 5 percentage points. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump were tied today in the popular vote before Rasmussen decided to do a little bit of trolling and drop a Harris +1 that tomorrow probably ends up going back to a tie or Trump +1 or you name it. So they're virtually in a dead heat as things stand today. You have less than 4% undecided. Some of that's going to go third party. Harris has not really done a lot to win or galvanize undecided voters. In fact, she's lost support when Donald Trump has ended up gaining support compared to a couple of weeks ago. And we've talked a lot about this because the national polling both times has underestimated Donald Trump. And even in the midterms, it underestimated Republicans in the national vote by, 0.3 percentage points or so. So looking at that, it begs the question, if the polls are this close, could Donald Trump actually win the national popular vote? And if so, Democrats are kind of coming around to the notion that it's possible, but can he win the popular vote and lose in the Electoral College? We're going to dive into this a little bit further. We're going to play a little bit of Harry Enten on CNN where he kind of explains this phenomenon but kind of misses the point because we understand they're not going to say the truth entirely in front of the audience at CNN. But first, really quickly, I got to tell you guys about my merch store because it's only going to be here for one more week. The 2024 election drop is here. We're doing a limited time special where you can buy one, get one 20% off all t-shirts, tank tops, and coffee mugs. We have great designs. We have the Make Cats Safe Again merchandise. We have the Make America Gain Again design, the Trump mugshot design, all the original designs as well. And you can buy a t-shirt and you can get a coffee mug for 20% off. I highly recommend the Trump Iconic Black mug. It's our best seller. It's my favorite mug. 5-star reviews across the board on the website. High quality. You got the Trump design on the front, the bullet with the American flag with the ear, and then on the back you have the epic inspirational quote. Great merchandise. Everybody that's bought it loves it, even the skeptics. I encourage you guys to check it out. The link will be in the description and pinned comment down below. So we have the national polling, and you also have the state polling, which is interesting because the state polls have really underestimated Trump in the Midwest. And we talk about Donald Trump building up a firewall. Democrats love to talk about, oh, we're going to have X amount of early voting firewall in these states. And in terms of what's actually happening in places like Arizona, even in Nevada, Republicans are actually the ones building up a firewall. But if you look at the electoral map, talking about electoral votes, Republicans, as things stand, if things continue on the trajectory, which it's not over and people need to get out and vote, and all that's true, but you look at the trajectory of the race, Donald Trump is building up a firewall where he is very likely to nab at least 268 electoral votes. The states that are kind of in question, you have Pennsylvania, where they do register by party, but a lot of the votes going to come on election day, and Donald Trump is likely going to win that vote. The question is, by how much is he going to win it by? And then you have Michigan and Wisconsin, which are a little bit more murky. Democrats are trying to spin the data to be like positive for them, but as time has gone on in Michigan, it's not as good as it was, a few weeks ago for them, just like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Republicans in the in-person early vote in these Republican areas are posting very big numbers, and that's true. So that's really what Trump needs to do to win the Electoral College. College, he needs to win one of those 3 Rust Belt states. Kamala Harris needs all 3 of them, which is a major, major problem for her because it's a hell of a lot easier to go 1 for 3 than to go 3 for 3. And that doesn't even take into account the underlying fundamentals of this race, which we've covered at length and will continue to cover at length on this channel. But I wanted to play this clip, or parts of this clip, from Harry Enton over at CNN because he's acknowledging what's going on. CNN in 2020, they had a poll, their final poll, had Biden plus 12. They were off by 7.5 points in favor of Biden. And now they dropped a poll today, and it was a dead heat tie. And if you put it on the swingometer, which breaks it down by demographics, Donald Trump wins handily. Like, he wins to the point where we would call it before midnight, and he would sweep the board in the swing states, and some states would be very, very close, like Virginia, which you would not anticipate to usually be that close. So, looking at what's going on here in the CNN clip, we'll play this right here.
Which we really haven't focused upon, a very, very tight race, John. Fact is, Donald Trump is very much in a position he could win the popular vote, which of course is something he would absolutely love to do.
And would be something very different than we have seen compared to last time and the polling compared to last time.
And this is true because the popular vote cutoff in the last election cycle was roughly around 4 percentage points, where Donald Trump needed to, I guess you would say, get it within 4 to win the popular vote. You could even argue, depending on trends, it would be above that, depending on which voters would go in his column before other voters. But that's just saying move all states by this much, this is what happens. And that was probably somewhere around a little bit more than 2 points, actually, like 2.5 points, maybe closer to 3 in 2016. And you actually had the inverse the previous couple cycles because of Obama's strength in the Midwest and because Romney and McCain didn't really have appeal to that region. But, in the Trump era where he runs it up with these working class white voters in the Rust Belt, that's kind of where you see this shift. Now, it is true, Donald Trump is doing better with other demographics that are not really, in the highest concentration in those states. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the popular vote shift is going to come back crashing down to the point where Donald Trump needs to win the popular vote by X amount to win the election in the Electoral College. And if the national polling is remotely accurate, Donald Trump should be in a phenomenal position right now, because I still think that bias cutoff, it's not going to be 4 points again, because yes, Donald Trump doing better with Hispanic voters isn't really going to help him in a state like Wisconsin. It will help him in Nevada and Arizona and help him win those states, but maybe not so much in Wisconsin. But that doesn't mean that Trump isn't going to win Wisconsin, because he's still doing very well with other demographics, and we'll get to that. But there is another part of this clip here where he basically claims that Donald Trump could lose the Electoral College while winning the popular vote, which is kind of absurd.
Donald Trump. But on the flip side of that, a potentially good sign for Democrats is, why is Donald Trump doing so well in the popular vote polls? You can dig down into the state level polling, and you can see that Donald Trump is doing particularly well in California, Florida, New York, and Texas. Of course, none of these states are really on the board at this point, so Donald Trump may end up gaining in the national popular vote polls, but actually is wasting votes, which could in fact lead to a case where Kamala Harris could sneak by in the Electoral College by sweeping those Great Lake battleground states, which at this point are way too close to call, John.
That's just not going to happen. It would be very, very difficult, and I kind of wanted to show it, because we have the election shuffler here, which isn't perfect because different states are going to have different turnout levels than 2020. But I just wanted to, break it down and say, okay, California, let's say if Trump is really doing better in California, let's say he somehow, by some miracle, gets California to be like a 21-point loss, which, according to certain early data, it's not completely implausible. He sees a massive improvement in California, because that early vote data there is a little bit more indicative, although it's true, is he going to get some of those Orange County, Republicans back? If he does, he probably is going to end up winning the election, because, that demographic, if he's really improving back to 2016 margins in terms of what he's losing among, college-educated whites, then there's virtually no path for Kamala Harris, and that's kind of the thing. And it does carry over depending on, what state you're talking about. But already you see California, massive shift, the biggest state. It only moves the popular vote by that much. Now, let's say in Texas, he manages to run up the score in Texas and he manages to win the state by, let's just say, like, his 2016 margins or so. We could even just give him like a, just trying to make sure we get the right data point here, somewhere around like an 8 or 9 point win. Okay, there we go. Now, Florida's another one, which Donald Trump, the early vote data is ridiculously good for Republicans. Let's say Trump improves by like 10 points in Florida, somewhere around there. He wins the state by like 13, which it's not implausible at this point, but it sounds outlandish. So already there. And let's talk about the state of New York right here, because New York is definitely a big state and Trump is improving in the polls there. Let's say he improves by like, let's even say 10 points or so, give or take 10 points. So we'll try to put it somewhere around there. Perfect. So already you look at the popular vote, it's 2.02%. So the bias can move, but you're giving Trump ridiculous shares in some of these states. And it's not enough to flip the popular vote outright or to change that dynamic. And then you look at Illinois, where, maybe we'll say that Trump does make ridiculous gains there. Let's say he gets it even down to just an 11-point loss or so, somewhere in that ballpark. You're seeing where it's going. It's still 1.79. And of course, you will see like a 5-point shift to the right on average in every state if the popular vote is going to go in Trump's column from 2020 as well. And that needs to be taken into consideration. But regardless, the point is that if the popular vote is within 1 or even within 2, and we're giving a lot of room for Donald Trump to grow in the popular vote in these deep red or blue, heavily populated states, still he's likely going to win the election overall. Because if you're doing better with, let's say, certain demographics that exist in high numbers in like suburban LA or suburban Chicago or suburban New York City, even if they're not perfectly aligned with those in Pennsylvania, it is true that Donald Trump is probably winning Pennsylvania. If he's doing that well in upstate New York, for example, where you have a lot of those voters that are kind of like those Irish voters, or some of these areas have like Polish voters, and that carries over to Pennsylvania. You look at the sub-demography, it is very similar. A lot of working class voters who may have voted for Trump in 2016 and Biden in 2020. Donald Trump, if he's winning them back in Rhode Island and parts of New York and Long Island, and he'll probably pick off some new voters in the state of New York, that's going to carry over to Pennsylvania. This is not a midterm year. This is a presidential year. If he's doing much better in New York City, as he even did in 2020, he's going to improve in the city of Philadelphia, as he did in 2020 by like 4 points. And it's not talked about a lot, but there's a lot of room to grow there for Republicans. So overall, the bottom line is, when you look at this, is it possible that the popular vote electoral college gap is going to shrink because Trump's doing a lot better with certain minority groups? Yes, I do believe that that advantage is going to shrink because of the big states that we see. If not, it's game over for Kamala Harris. It's not even close unless there's a ridiculous polling error the other way, which would not really add up with the early vote data and the voting patterns that Democrats typically have. But what I will say is that there's virtually zero shot that Donald Trump wins the popular vote but loses the entire election, because he's probably going to go 1 for 3 at a minimum in these states by at least 1 vote if he's doing that well in all of these, blue states, especially because of how close the Rust Belt was in 2020, where in Wisconsin, you saw it essentially neck and neck. Michigan, I think Trump has a lot of room to grow, but even then, it is the bluest of those 3, but I still think he's got a decent shot just based off of his unique appeal and the current state of the economy and the issues that are important there, and obviously things like sub-demographic trends. And then Pennsylvania, Biden's out of the picture. You have Kamala Harris, who has no ties to the area, no ties to the Philadelphia media market or northeastern Pennsylvania. And then you have Donald Trump, who essentially almost lost his life in Butler, Pennsylvania, and is doing everything in his power to win the state by campaigning hard there down the stretch. Yeah, it's unlikely, is what I'm saying. It's very unlikely. It's a freak accident scenario if Trump wins that popular vote, or even if it's like within half a point, which it very well could be. Donald Trump is going to have probably a 95% at a minimum, if not 99% chance at winning the presidential election. And you can look at the swingometer here. It's very unlikely you could even find some sort of scenario. You'd have to flip the demographics on their head. You know, if black turnout is low, if it gets down to like 11% of the electorate, which could happen depending on what we've seen in some of these states like Georgia and North Carolina, and let's say Trump does gain significantly with that demographic, it does carry over to Pennsylvania. It does carry over to Wisconsin as well. So if he's running it up in those places, he probably has at least a higher floor. And if he's doing worse with white college grads, you know, that's definitely something that you could say would hurt him. But still, it's not going to necessarily be enough for him to win the popular vote at that point. He's at least got to hold his own. And even if it's 43-55, he's likely going to improve a lot with the white working class voters if he's going to lose ground with college whites and then manage to come close in the popular vote. And at that point, he would be winning the Rust Belt 3 in its entirety. So when you look at the demographics and you look at trends, there's virtually no scenario, barring something insane, where Donald Trump loses the popular voter, even if it's like within 1. Because I think if it's like, 1.8, 1.9, maybe a gray area depending on how well he does in some of these big states. But even then, I think it's a little bit iffy that it doesn't carry over given the fact it's a presidential year. But if the popular vote's this close, you're not seeing Trump lose. I will say that. Now, it doesn't mean the polls are right, and it does mean people need to get out and vote and continue doing what we've been doing because our numbers are great so far, but you don't get to celebrate at the 1-yard line. You don't get to take your foot off the gas for about another 11 and a half days or so, and then we can watch the results come in. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.